my name is Sean and welcome back to another reaction. Today, we're going to be reacting to How Broke is Peter Griffin by 10K Productions. Now, I think it was How Broke was Hank Hill was in my recommended by this guy named 10K Productions. I'm like, hey, maybe I should react to this. And I wanted to react to the newest one to see how they do this. And the newest one is How Broke is Peter Griffin. So this is a new channel I'm going to be reacting to. I watched the first 10 seconds of the How Broke is Hank Hill, like I do with every video I react to, just to see how it plays out. And it was pretty okay. The first 15 seconds. So hopefully this is gonna be really funny. Make sure to go subscribe to 10K Productions. Also, I will leave their Patreon down in the description below. You can go donate there. And without further ado, let's react.
Listen now, Mr. Pewterschmidt, you're a businessman. I'm a businessman. And I've got a proposal that I guarantee you can't refuse. See, I wrote this erotica book, and I was hoping you could loan me $7 billion to publish it.
How about I loan you $5? It's at the bottom of this jar of barbed wire and salt.
Ah! Ow! Ow!
Okay, that's an iconic scene. Does Carter really, I forgot his name. Does Carter really have $7 billion? Is he really a billionaire? I thought he was I knew he was a millionaire. I didn't think he was a billionaire.
It seems today that all you see are families on TV that are living way beyond their means. And the Griffins just might be the best example of this. Between Peter's crazy antics, his spending habits, and his difficulty keeping jobs throughout the series, the family's been seen struggling at multiple times. But are they really doing alright, or are they just scraping by? Well, let's get into that and figure out just how broke is Peter Griffin.
I think they are broke, because I remember an episode where Peter wanted to buy a sushi restaurant, I think, and Lois said, we're running out of money, and I think it was the same episode, everybody had to get a job. Like, Lois worked at a grocery store, and everybody else had a job.
Stop it! Cut it out! I have a glandular problem.
That'll be $60.
I don't know. I think they are kind of broke, though.
And consider this your official spoiler warning for Family Guy, a show that's been ongoing for the last 20 years, basically. And hey, while we're here, comment down below what you'd like to hear me talk about next. It definitely helps the algorithm not hate my channel. Or follow me on Twitter at 10kbill to yell at me about anything I may have missed.
I think they also have a How Broke is Bob from Bob's Burgers as well.
As is tradition when we talk about these kinds of series, let's get meta and talk about the show's timeline first. We've talked about floating timelines on the show before, so I won't spend too much time on this. So the show's timeline is kind of messy to say the least. This is actually even mentioned within the show itself.
Come on, everybody, let's go to the mall. It's time for the Christmas carnival. It's Stewie's first Christmas.
Again?
But this time, it actually has something of a reason behind it. Family Guy is actually a show within a show. Peter, Lois, Meg, Chris, Steve, and Brian are all actually actors within the show that is Family Guy. And Fox, the network the show is aired.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense, because I think there was an episode where they played themselves and the house wasn't real. And they actually played their own characters. I think it was the show where, it was the one where Peter got fired. This is a spoiler. I'll make sure to put spoilers at the beginning, but still.
Airing on is actually paying for the vast majority of Peter's reckless purchases. This explains a lot, but not everything. So for this video, we'll mostly be taking into account the earlier seasons of the show before things got, we'll say, out of hand, and when the general narrative of Peter's backstory was a little more coherent. Speaking of which, let's get into Peter's backstory. The first time we hear an age for Peter isn't until season 5. In this season, Lois mentions that Peter is actually 43, which if we estimate that he was that age in the first season, which aired in 1999, he would have been born in 1956 in Mexico, as his mother went to Mexico to have an abortion but ends up sneaking Peter back into the country. Now,
wait, his eye. Look at his eye. It's on his nose. It's doing the thing. It's doing the thing.
Before people go into the comments and tell me how he wouldn't actually be paying any kind of taxes while technically being an undocumented immigrant, there are a bunch of cases of undocumented immigrants actually paying taxes through an individual taxpayer identification number, or ITIN. Peter would be raised by his uber-religious father and his chain-smoking mother. The first time we see Peter actively working in his life is as a towel boy at a country club where he meets Lois, who he would later marry. I think that Peter would begin working at 16, considering what we know about his father and his father's work ethic. This would be in 1972. Peter and Lois both also look pretty young at this time, and we see in the episode Death Lives that during their first date, the song Baby, I Love Your Way can be heard. Peter was likely being paid minimum wage during this time, but that really doesn't matter because I don't think Peter is actively saving any money at this time.
Yeah, I don't think he was saving any money because I think he was spending more money than saving.
Mostly due to his lack of impulse control. But for our sake, let's discuss how we will be eventually doing our math. We'll be starting with Peter and Lois' salaries, do some tax math, subtract yearly expenses, and have them put away 5% of what's left into a bank account earning 5% interest. I have them putting only 5% away to try and account for the fact that I think they're mostly just scraping by. As for expenses, there are two major ones that are happening each and every year. These are Peter's excessive drinking and his impulsiveness. For his alcoholism, we'll be estimating that he's spending the equivalent of $10,000 each year, and for
Plus, he also goes to the bar. Peter drinks at the bar, but he also drinks at home as well because you can see him drinking at home and at the bar. So
his impulsiveness, we'll be estimating it at the equivalent of $5,000 each year, which will be, of course, adjusted for inflation. 1977 would be a landmark year in Peter's life. For starters, I'll have this be the year that Peter and Lois would actually get married. I think that Lois would convince her parents to pay for the wedding, otherwise they would not be able to afford the relatively large wedding they're seen to have. This would also be the year that Peter would get his job at the Happy-Go-Lucky Toy Factory, where he works at the beginning of the series. In Season 3's episode, One If by Clam, Two If by Sea, we see that Peter's actually been hanging out at the clam and complaining about his job at the toy factory since at least 1977. An assembly line worker in Rhode Island can make $23,570 today. We'll also be taking Lois' salary into consideration. However, outside of a few rare instances, we've never seen Lois working a steady job. Instead, I'll have her doing what we've seen her doing throughout the series, teach piano. A pretty good piano tutor can make around $30 an hour. If Lois is teaching only 10 students a week for an hour each, she would be making $15,600 per year. Peter and Lois would also get their own apartment this year. The average rent in Rhode Island around this time was $1,890, which will add on to our yearly expenses. From here, we can fast forward a bit to 1982, when the Griffin's first child, Meg, is born. Despite the general hatred that Meg has faced, she was still raised pretty normally. We'll be estimating that Peter and Lois spent the equivalent of $5,000 each year for each child. We'll also have this be the year that Peter and Lois buy the car we see them driving for the majority of the series. A 1980 used 4-door station wagon around this time could go for around $1,000, which will have them pay for in full. 2 years later, the Griffins would give birth to their second child, Chris. We'll be adding the equivalent of another $5,000 onto their expenses each year, but the birth of Chris would lead to another major change for the family. The broken condom that led to the birth of Chris also led to a lawsuit that bought the family their home. But just how realistic is this? Well, actually, in the 90s, there was a successful lawsuit filed by a Scottish couple who ended up winning £120,000, which is $157,749.60. And that can certainly buy a home, but just how much is their home actually worth? For that, we'll have to figure out where exactly in Rhode Island Quahog is. In the early series, you can make out some buildings behind the Griffin's home that are very clearly Providence, the capital. So, looking around some areas in Providence, there is one area that kind of jumps out at me, Pawtucket. We know that Quahog is the home to the Pawtucket Brewery, so it all kind of seems to add up. A relatively similar home in that area can go for around $280,000. We'll round this up to $300 to try and account for how good of an area they actually seem to live in. Back in 1986, homes were worth 41.84% of what they are today. That means that the Griffin's home back then would have been worth $125,520. We'll have them use all of any money they would have gotten for the lawsuit buying their home. Again, we can fast forward to the year 1994, when I'll be having Brian officially join the family.
But at the same time, Brian was he was homeless at the time, so I don't think they paid any money for him.
We'll be estimating that they're spending the equivalent of $500.
But yet they have to feed him and all that. But he can kind of do it himself. Plus he drinks, margaritas. I couldn't think of the word. I was about to say tequila. No, he drinks margaritas, which means he drinks as well.
Per year on Brian. Then, in 1998, Peter and Lois would have their final child, Stewie. We'll add on the equivalent of $5,000 one final time. And that's where we'll end our math, right where the series really kicks off. I'm choosing to end it here because after this point, the Griffins in their universe would be much, much better off following the success of their television show. But that's completely off camera, aside from a few rare instances. So, in 1999, the Griffins would have $5,209.44 in their bank account, and their home would be worth $185,160. Which means that Peter Griffin is worth $190,369.44. Which honestly sounds about right. I figured Peter would have little to no actual money in his bank account, and his home would be where most of his wealth would lie. But anyways, this has been 10K Bill, and thanks for watching. Comment down below what you'd like to hear.
Yeah, a lot of it made sense because, Peter is a compulsive drinker. He's a crazed maniac that spends a lot of money on stupid stuff. So it would definitely make sense for Peter to not have that much. But anyway. So that's gonna be it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. This was a really good video. I can't wait to react to some more. Right now on screen says how broke are the Belchers and Bob's Burgers. So hopefully I might do the Hank Hill one. Then I'll react to that one. They got a couple other ones. I think they got a SpongeBob one too. Yeah, how much is SpongeBob worth on the screen right now? Anyway, original link in the description below. Go subscribe to 10K Productions. Also, go check out their Patreon in the description below. And without further ado, thank you all so much for watching. Give it a like if you liked it. Subscribe if you're brand new, and hit that post notification bell so you get notified every time I upload. But only if you enjoyed the video. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching. I love you guys, and as always, I will see you in the bye bye.